In our first episode, journeying to the past through archaeology and its many marvelous examination techniques. You're listening to Nature Middle East podcast, broadcasting from Cairo, Egypt. This episode, Precision Medicine in Qatar, debunking the biggest myth about waterpipe or shisha smoking, and a glimpse into Egypt's first ever archaeological science conference planned for next year.
One of the most important aims of the conference is highlighting to a lot of people that archaeological sciences and historical research can come together very easily.
Within this conference, we could have the opportunity to overcome the problems of the sampling and how can we do analysis in Egypt, as well as raising the capacity of the Egyptian research.
This is the first episode of Nature Middle East podcast, and I'm Pakinam Aimer. In Qatar, a small leap in the field of pharmacogenetics has taken place. In a first, scientists used information from whole genome sequencing of 100 Qataris to study the effects of two commonly prescribed blood thinners. In a country where cardiovascular diseases are the number one cause of death, scrutinizing the effects of these drugs in patients according to each individual's genetic makeup means that they are getting exactly the right medical cocktails in precisely the right dosages. If you want to read more on this advancement in precision medicine, log on to nature.com/nMiddleEast. Coming up in other research highlights, how the ever-popular water pipes or shishas managed to blindside millions around the Arab world to how dangerous they are. Don't forget, you can subscribe to this monthly podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes. Nature Middle East brings you the latest breakthrough research and the hottest topics in emerging science in the Middle East. Analysis of over 22 studies about water pipe smoking has shown that misconception among the general public has led many Arab smokers to replace cigarettes with water pipes in the mistaken belief that it's safer. The study at Weill Cornell Medicine Qatar, however, concludes that the contraption is anything but. Sure, water pipe tobacco is sweet, having been soaked in molasses or honey, but the popular pastime can lead to bronchitis, tuberculosis, and cancers of the lung, esophagus, head, and neck. And now over to archaeological scientist and Nature Middle East writer Meredith Brand and our guest in the studio to talk about one of the most exciting fields of scientific research in this region. And now over to archaeological scientist and Nature Middle East writer Meredith Brand and our guest in the studio to talk about one of the most exciting fields of scientific research in the region.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be talking about archaeological science, or archaeometry, which is a diverse field with a growing impact on the way we understand the past in terms of socioeconomic practices, technology, health, diet, and the environment.
For those who don't know, an archaeologist's first task is to very simply stamp dates on different eras and their associated artifacts. For that, they use a workable system that is independent from calendar systems associated with modern or ancient societies. Archaeologists can use almost any method or technique in the medical sciences, biology, geology, chemistry, or physics to analyze ancient materials. The research possibilities are endless.
Archaeologists, for instance, use radiocarbon or C14 dating to date organic materials. C14 is present in all living things and it decays at a known rate. Its ratio in an organism will tell us when it died. We also can identify the chemical fingerprint of a sample that informs on a variety of topics from ancient diet and health to trade and the economy.
It's a massive field. In Egypt alone, there are numerous studies trying to build a picture of ancient civilizations, population movements, and prehistoric environmental changes. From analyzing soil, human and animal plant remains, to deciphering recipes of pigments and colorants involved in trade and construction, scientists are still at it despite the many challenges. Joining me and Meredith in the studio discussion is archaeological scientists Bassem Gehed and Minna Al-Durri.
Welcome, Bassem and Minna. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, Bassem, why don't you tell us what your specialization is in archaeological science?
First of all, I'm a painting conservator, and my work is to find an answer for the questions related to how did the ancient Egyptian execute the magnificent paintings. So basically all of us would see the paintings and we would like to know how it survived for all this thousands of years, and how did the ancient Egyptians find out the way to create the pigments and the binding materials and prepare the walls.
What about you, Minna? You're an archaeobotanist, right? What does it mean? What do you do?
It means I study archaeological plant remains. Any plant remains that have survived on archaeological sites, regardless of whether the site is a house or a village or a cemetery or a tomb, any plant remains that have survived is something that I can study and analyze, and I can identify the material and figure out what kinds of materials, what kind of plants were available, how these plants were used, how they were processed, how they were traded, and looking overall at the economy and the environment.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, you guys are a great example of archaeological science in the sense that you're examining issues dealing with technological change, trade, the economy, the ancient environment, all through looking at things like pigments and plants. It's very fascinating. So with your work, why is archaeological science so important in the study of Egyptian archaeology? I mean, there's tons of texts and tombs and all these ancient paintings. Why do we need to go and look at tiny seeds and plants or the chemical composition of paint on a tomb wall?
A lot of what survives to today from ancient Egypt represents very much the elite and the royalty, whether you have temples and fancy tombs that belong to the elite. But what we're studying really tells you a lot about the actual people, the actual society, about the different technologies they used and the different foods they ate. So you're taking your research a step further and learning so much more about another layer of the society.
So why is it so important right now to develop strong archaeological science practices in Egypt, in terms of developing labs and expertise and specializations in the university and in the Ministry of Antiquity?
Very, very strict regulations that govern the export of samples, and many projects prefer not to have to deal with that. And therefore, people have to do their analysis locally. And if they're unable to find the labs and the expertise and the technicians to undertake their analysis here, they just don't do them. So what happens is we end up losing so much information because the labs, the facilities, the technicians are just not equipped to deal with the kind of analysis that in Europe are very easy. In Europe, you click your fingers and you're able to then do a lot of the analysis that you need. But here, you just don't have the facilities.
So how are scientists going around these types of challenges in order to be able to do their work here?
With some projects that are able to find the archaeological material that would be relevant to their research, that is already abroad, archaeological material that has been exported from Egypt 100 years ago when it was still allowed, they resort to undertaking the research and the experiments that they need on this material. However, this material excavated 100 years ago was not very well stored under specific conditions. You don't know how it was sampled. You don't know how it was extracted. And so the results that you get out of undertaking analysis on this material are limited to an extent.
So the methodologies of the archaeological excavation and how these samples are extracted are extremely important?
So the main problem is that people who are doing the analysis, they don't understand really the main question archaeologists want to understand during doing the work on the site. So as soon as you got your samples from the site and then you transport it to Cairo, here the main problem is that you don't really do specific work that you need to analyze the samples, and then you lost the samples and you lose the results.
Despite all these challenges, I love that you're still soldiering on and trying to bring recognition to this field of science. And I want to talk a bit about the conference, the first ever conference of ancient Egyptian materials and technology that you two are organizing. Tell me a bit about that. How significant is it?
We thought about doing the International Conference for Science for Ancient Egyptian Materials and Technology in Egypt in 2017 to give the opportunity both for Egyptian and the international researcher to sit in the same place and then to have the dialogue. And within this conference, we could have the opportunity to overcome the problems of the sampling and how can we do analysis in Egypt, as well as raising the capacity of the Egyptian researcher.
I think one of the most important aims of the conference is highlighting to a lot of people that archaeological sciences and historical research can come together very easily. There's a huge separation in Egypt, especially in Egypt, between those who do history, those who do texts, those who do art history and religion, and between those doing sciences, like Bassem was just saying. And I think people don't realize that you can actually do both. You can actually, like you said, Meredith, you can wear both hats. And this is one of the things that the conference is going to highlight. You can be trained as an Egyptologist, but still be able to understand, undertake, and interpret archaeological material using sciences.
So I think that you brought up a really important, issue about the connectivity of this conference. And another important issue is that as a researcher doing archaeological science, I work with ancient ceramics. So I do scientific analysis of clay. So I go to the site, I have my samples, I do the paperwork, I have all my permissions, and they get sent to Cairo. But the next question is, where do I do this analysis? Is there a community? Is anybody else doing analysis similar to mine? Are there any comparative samples? How can I actually go about doing the work? And there are so many people, both in Egypt and abroad, that don't really know how to navigate archaeological science here. And so this conference is putting everyone together in a room for the first time. So if you do pigment analysis and you do various sort of chemical analysis on pigments, you can find all your pigment people and you can ask them questions. What labs do you use? Where's the equipment? How much does it cost? All these kind of things that wasn't available before. So I'm really excited about that.
Are you getting a lot of research input, like a lot of submissions so far? I know it's happening in November next year, but you've already had a call for papers, right?
Yeah, the call for papers starts in this September, so we're still in the beginning. And it's extend to the 15th of January. So we expect that the people will start to submit by the
14th of January. Everyone's going to start
I know, I'm going to be
submitting.
guilty of that one myself. It's going to be 14th of January.
But so far, we've had a lot of input. We've had lots of people express interest, especially colleagues working within the Ministry of Antiquities or working in the universities or even students. A lot of conservators are interested because conservators tend to do a lot of scientific analysis anyway within their work, but we also have a lot of archaeology students who are very interested in the topic. So it's been a very good response so far.
So exciting times ahead for Egyptian archaeologists.
Yeah, and in order to encourage the Egyptian colleagues, we said that there will be the 40 place for 40 Egyptian colleagues that their fees will be waived, so they don't have to pay any fees, in order to encourage them to submit papers and to attend the conference, so that we are going to facilitate the issue for Egyptians who are willing to interact with the community of the archaeological science.
So thank you guys for coming out and talking about the exciting Science of Ancient Egyptian Materials and Technology Conference that's going to be on November 4th through 7th, 2017. It's organized by the Ministry of Antiquities in collaboration with a host of international archaeological organizations like the Egypt Exploration Society, the German Archaeological Institute, the American Research Center in Egypt, and the French Archaeological Institute. So it's going to be a wonderful conference.
And researchers, don't wait until 14 January to submit your papers. If you're listening, start doing this now. Thank you, Meredith, Bassem, and Minatullah. For more features, news, and highlights of the best research in the region, go to nature.com/nmiddleeast. That's it for today. Nature Middle East podcast will air monthly via this link. You can also find us on SoundCloud and iTunes under Nature Middle East. I'm Pakinam Amir.
And I'm Meredith Brand.
Thank you for listening.